Have you ever wondered how easy it is to disappear? Just one wrong step, one wrong decision, and you're gone. That's exactly what Lisa didn't think about that night. She wasn't the type to dwell on dark thoughts or worry about strangers. She had always believed that if you treated people with kindness, the world would return the favor. But that was before she met him. It started like any other evening. A late shift at work, the cool autumn air nipping at her as she walked home, her thoughts drifting to the warmth of her apartment. The streets were mostly empty, illuminated only by the flickering streetlights. As she turned the corner onto the narrow road leading home, she spotted him. A man, standing alone at the end of the block, half hidden in the shadows. He looked like he had been there for hours, his hood pulled low, his body still. Most people would have kept walking, ignoring him. But Lisa wasn't most people. Maybe that's why she stopped when he called out to her. "Miss?" His voice was low, rough around the edges, like he hadn't spoken in days. "Can you help me?" Lisa hesitated for a moment, her instincts flickering like a dying flame. Her mother had always told her to be cautious, but she had also taught her to be kind. So she took a step closer. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice soft, almost apologetic. The man took a step forward, his movements slow and deliberate. His face remained mostly hidden, but she could feel his eyes on her, watching her every move. "I'm lost," he mumbled. "My phone's dead, and I need to make a call. Could you help me out?" Lisa's hand instinctively went to her pocket, fingers brushing against her phone. The unease prickled at the back of her neck. She told herself it was nothing, that he was probably just some poor guy who needed help. After all, what harm could come from letting him use her phone? But as she pulled it out, something shifted in the air. A cold, creeping dread began to curl around her, but it was too late. He was already too close. She handed him the phone, her fingers brushing against his. His skin was cold, unnaturally so. The kind of cold that didn't come from a chilly night, but from something deeper, something that didn't belong. "Thanks," he said, his voice no longer shaking. It had steadied, become calm. Too calm. As he held the phone, his eyes darted over to the alleyway behind him, and something dark flickered in his gaze. Something hungry. Lisa's heart began to race. She tried to step back, but his hand shot out, gripping her wrist with startling force. "Actually," he said, his grip tightening, "I think I'll keep you company for a while." Panic surged through her, but before she could pull away, he yanked her into the shadows of the alley. Her phone fell from his hand, clattering to the pavement, the screen flashing with a missed call, her last connection to the outside world fading with the light. The alley was suffocating, the darkness pressing in on her from all sides. She screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the night. No one would hear her here. No one would come. He pinned her against the cold brick wall, his face now inches from hers, his breath hot and rancid. "You should have just kept walking," he hissed, his lips curling into a sick smile. "But you had to be nice, didn't you?" Lisa struggled, her mind racing, but she was trapped. He was stronger than he looked, his fingers digging into her skin like claws. As her vision blurred, she caught a glimpse of something horrifying. Behind him, in the shadows, were piles of bodies. Broken, lifeless, discarded, victims, just like she was about to become. "You're not the first," he whispered, his voice dripping with malice. "But don't worry, you won't be lonely." Lisa's body trembled with fear, her heart pounding in her chest as she realized the truth. She had made the worst mistake of her life. She had stopped. Have you ever wondered what happens when you trust someone who doesn't deserve it? Megan never did. Not until she found her friend's phone lying in the alley. It had been 3 days since anyone had heard from Lisa. Megan knew something was wrong. Lisa wasn't the type to just disappear. She was reliable, punctual, and most importantly, always checked in with her friends. So when Lisa missed her coffee date without so much as a text, Megan's gut told her something was terribly wrong. The police had been no help, as usual. Adults can choose to go missing, they had said. But Megan knew better. Lisa hadn't chosen this. The city streets were quieter than usual. As Megan walked the same path Lisa would have taken that night. The same path that led straight into that alley. Megan stood at the mouth of the alleyway now, staring into the darkness. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, and shadows stretched long across the pavement. She didn't want to go in there. Something about it felt off, like the air was heavier, the silence too thick, but she had no choice. Lisa's phone had pinged here, the last place anyone knew she had been. Taking a deep breath, Megan stepped into the alley, her heart pounding in her chest. She told herself it was nothing, that Lisa had probably just dropped her phone, maybe bumped into a stranger who helped her home. But the deeper she went, the stronger the smell became, an overwhelming stench of rot and decay. Her foot kicked something. She froze, her pulse quickening. Looking down, her heart sank. There, lying half buried in the grime, was Lisa's phone. The screen was shattered, but the case, bright pink with a silly cartoon character, was unmistakable. Megan crouched down, picking up the phone, her hands trembling. It was cold, too cold. As she turned it over in her hands, a soft sound echoed behind her. A footstep. Just one. She whipped around, eyes wide, but no one was there. Only shadows. And then a voice, low and raspy, slithered out of the darkness. Looking for someone? Megan's breath caught in her throat. The voice was so close, yet the alley remained empty. She clutched the phone tighter, taking a step back. You know, your friend was nice. The voice continued, closer now, a whisper against her ear. Too nice. She stopped. She trusted. Megan's skin crawled. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to get out of there, but her legs wouldn't move. A figure slowly emerged from the deeper shadows, tall, hooded, his face obscured. His clothes were ragged, his movements deliberate, like a predator toying with prey. And now here you are, he said, a grin spreading across his unseen face, following her footsteps. Megan backed away, her pulse racing in her ears. Where is she? She demanded, her voice shaking but firm. What did you do to her? The man tilted his head, the grin never leaving his voice. She didn't listen to that little voice inside her head, the one telling her to walk away. You're not like her, though. I can tell. You're smarter. You know better. He took another step forward, and Megan could now see his eyes glinting from beneath the hood. They weren't the eyes of a man. They were cold, empty, as if they belonged to something far worse. She stumbled back, her mind racing. She needed to run. She needed to move. Tell me where she is, Megan yelled, her back now against the alley wall. The brick was cold, rough beneath her fingertips. The man stopped, standing just a few feet away now, his grin widening as if savoring her fear. Why don't you take a guess? He whispered, his voice dripping with malice. Megan's stomach twisted as her gaze dropped to the shadows at his feet. Shapes, faint, barely visible in the dark but unmistakable, lay crumpled and still. Bodies. Her breath hitched as her eyes landed on something familiar, a piece of bright pink fabric peeking from beneath the pile. Lisa's jacket. A cold wave of terror washed over her as reality sank in. Megan turned to run, but the man moved faster than she could have anticipated. His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with a vice-like grip. His touch was cold, too cold, like death itself. Now, he hissed, pulling her closer. No need to leave so soon. You've been so helpful, so trusting. Why don't you stay a while? She screamed, yanking her arm free and stumbling back. But he was already there, looming over her like a shadow that couldn't be outrun. Lisa trusted me too, he whispered, his face now inches from hers, the smell of rot thick on his breath. And look where it got her. Megan's vision blurred, her mind spinning with panic. She could feel his grip tightening, squeezing the air from her lungs. There was no escape, no way out. The man leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. You should have kept walking. In one final desperate move, Megan shoved the man with all her strength, catching him off balance. She bolted toward the alley's mouth, her legs pumping as fast as they could carry her, the sound of his laughter echoing behind her. She didn't stop until she was back on the street, gasping for air, her heart pounding in her throat. She turned back once, just once, and saw him standing there at the edge of the alley, smiling that same sick grin. Megan knew, without a doubt, that she had only narrowly escaped what her friend couldn't. But she also knew something far worse. This wasn't over, and next time, there wouldn't be a second chance.